letting everyone know about the upcoming events that we have as part of the series. So we have every Wednesday the community mindfulness meditation session, and then Wednesday we have surviving COVID-19 impacts, or next Tuesday we have surviving COVID-19 impacts on the LGBTQ+ community by Angie Baxter. And then we have climate justice examining climate change through an equity lens, and the impact of COVID-19 on mental health and work-life integration. So please visit the diversity website to RSVP to these events if you're interested. And just as a heads up, this session is being recorded. We hope to post these sessions online for people who weren't able to attend, so they have access to the information. So before we start, I want to introduce and thank our speakers. So we have Marjorie Zatz, the Vice Provost and Graduate Dean. We have Samuel Traina, the Vice Chancellor for Research and Economic Development. Chris Kello, the Associate Dean and to be Interim Vice Provost and Grad Dean as of July 1st. And Rose Scott, who is the Vice Chair of the IRB Board. So I will turn that over to all of our speakers.
And just to let everyone know, so there was a list of questions that were put together by the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and the Graduate Student Association. So part of what we're going to be doing with the session is initially starting off with those questions and presenting those questions to our speakers and having them answer. Anybody who wants to answer can answer. And then we'll do that for about the first half of the session. If anybody has any questions or anything like that, please feel free to add them into the chat.
Lay down.
We'll have a specific question answer session at the end.
Right. So I can start by saying that for all domestic students, and that includes undocumented students, we are able to provide some additional summer resources through the CARE Act and then through other sources for undocumented students who qualify under the California DREAM Act. And so it's not a ton of money, but it's some money anyway that can help with the summer. And then we've been trying to make sure that everyone who had internships lined up that fell apart, that they were covered. And most of the schools and departments have been able to do that, but we've been working to check and make sure that no one's sort of fallen through the cracks there. So most people should have about the same money that they were going to, plus a little bit more through the CARE Act. For domestic students, for international students, we are not able legally to provide that same funding. And we don't have other sources to use to supplement that. So we have to go by the federal law on that.
Thank you, Marjorie, for that.
Let me just add a general comment that we are, in all likelihood, going to be relaunching the vast majority of the research program for the campus by around mid-June is my guess. Marjorie, tell me if you think that that's a realistic date. That's what.
No, I think we need to do that.
We gave an aspirational date of June 1st, knowing that the campus won't be able to go that fast, but if we said mid-June, then it would be July 1st. So I think realistically we'll be ready mid-June. And so everyone that has been and should be employed on grants or on research activities, those should be back full force under a set of COVID-19 protections, but people should be able to do research this summer, period.
Yeah. Maybe I can just chime in and add that, with respect to summer funding, which is, most immediate concern that I think this, this first question is about, in addition to the monies that Marjorie talked about, I've also been working with the chairs and the units, sort of, maybe you can sort of think of it as behind the scenes, just to make sure that to whatever extent that we can support them to support you, that this happens. I don't know if I want to go through, I have at least 2 and then 3 in mind, but I would rather not call them out, but specific units who have been able to use either grad division funds or other funds to further support students in their units. Now that's not at the grad division level, but we are coordinated with them
Mhm.
so that, and working with them to make sure that if they have any, sources of funding that they can use to make sure that everybody's taken care of, that it's done. And again, as far as we know, I think we haven't heard any major issues. Bring them to us. If there are issues, please let us know. So
Yeah, so thank you all for, that was the first question that I was going to pose, which was addressing the financial needs of grad students. So something in the line of you mentioned, Samuel, that the goal is to help students resume research this summer. So one of the questions that was posed is, how will labs purchase necessary sanitation products when they're already in short supply for the general public? And
so for this to happen, the campus, we've come to the realization that the campus has to provide sanitation supplies as well as protective gear. So whatever kind of face coverings we end up utilizing will be purchased and distributed by the campus. So this is not the expectation is that this is not something that graduate students or faculty or postdocs will have to provide. It will be provided by the campus. People doing research on campus will have to engage in a certain amount of cleaning themselves because as you see the model that we're laying out, it's going to be very difficult for it to be fully covered by custodial services. But nevertheless, I personally want to do my own cleaning because I know what I do and what I clean and not rely on someone else. There's still logistical issues that we have to work out, but the goal is to not require anyone to provide these materials. And we have long-term acquisition contracts throughout UC that appear to be having some success in obtaining the sanitation supplies and even the PPE that we will need going forward.
Mhm. I should note, Chris is also on the committee that's been working on this.
Yes, he is. So the three of us have been heavily engaged in this for the last several weeks.
Great, thank you. And the other question also relating to research is regarding participants. So how will potential participants be notified of how the university is protecting their safety once grad students are able to resume research?
So you mean human subject research participants?
Yes.
So that actually falls under the IRB, and I'm not going to speak for the IRB, but it'd probably be necessary for the researchers to convey that information to their subjects. But Rose, you may want to address that.
Rose.
Yeah, this is something that we're currently actively working on. And we had a call about it yesterday, and we have another one next week. And so we're sort of gathering information. But so we'll have recommendations about this out before the research starts back up. Right now, we're hoping that we can allow some people to engage in human subjects research, provided it can be done in a manner that meets certain safety requirements. And as part of that, we'll want to inform, you're right, the participants that we are meeting these safety requirements so that they feel comfortable and can make an informed choice, right? That's a big part of research, is making an informed decision about whether to participate. And is under COVID-19, part of that is having an informed about what are the risks and how are they being mitigated. So the researchers, it's going to be the onus on them, I think, to provide some information about what's being done in their lab and in their building to help mitigate those risks for the participants.
And I just want to make sure that everyone understands the role of the IRB at every university. This is not trying to put extra onus on them, but they do not report to the campus. They report directly to the federal government. It's intentional that they are not to be swayed by the campus. So what the IRB decides, the IRB decides. We provide support for them to help them with their logistics of dealing with the protocols, but these are federal mandated requirements that they report to the federal government. They do not report to any university.
And they tell us how we will do things.
Correct.
All right, so the next question is if personal protective equipment is needed in order to conduct research, will it be provided for grad student researchers, undergrad research assistants, and research participants?
Yes, and we answered that question about researchers. I think the answer is yes. We're advocating, I can tell you that I'm advocating, and I'm sure the campus will do this, that we probably have to provide it for human subject participants as well, because it's kind of hard to envision someone coming in and being a research subject and everyone around them has protective equipment on and they don't have it and they're told, well, you got to bring your own. That's just not going to work. So we expect that we're going to have to provide those resources for the participants.
And going back to what you had mentioned earlier, Chris, about kind of grad div trying to form relationships with some of the departments and seeking how to address grad student issues, have departments been encouraged to ask their grad students how COVID-19 is impacting their research, or to ask their grad students what concerns they have for returning to campus and restarting their research, especially if it is human subjects related?
Yeah, so I know there have been surveys that have gone out on this. That's actually at the campus level. And so, you know, that will provide information that can be fed back to the departments. And I know that, you know, when we have, I wouldn't say it's a formal directive. This is not something that the grad division would really do to sort of, you know, instruct the departments to do this. But every time we are talking and we are, you know, constantly in talks about this, we have meetings with the grad group chairs, for example. We are always, you know, basically engaging that in dialogue with them, and then in turn they engage that dialogue with their students. So the long and short of it is, yeah, absolutely, we are gathering information at multiple levels about this. Marjorie, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but yeah, I guess not.
Well, let me add something. I think it's safe to say that COVID-19 has impacted every person in the university in their attempts to do research. Faculty, undergraduates, graduate student, postdocs were all aware of it. Even if your research can be done remotely, it's still challenging to do it in the confines of your home entirely. You know, people get stir crazy if for no other reason. So it's impacting the entire campus enormously, which is why we're so committed to kind of returning to work in a safe way as quickly as we can.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I should have said another body that we need to talk about is Grad Council. And, you know, they oversee the academic sort of oversight of graduate studies on campus. And very immediately, they put out guidelines for all the graduate groups to basically give them leeway for making extensions to academic, you know, progress towards degree and requirements. In the grad division, we've done whatever we can to make extensions. Maybe you just saw recently that there was an extension for filing deadlines out to May 29th because we were able to do that. So I think everybody's fully aware and understanding that, you know, first of all, like Sam said, everybody's affected, and we're all, and he's speaking with respect to the research. And let me just say, with, you know, on behalf of Grad Council, with respect to the academic mission of the university and degree progress, we all understand. Top down, bottom up, all sideways, you name it. And so, and so after those guidelines went out, we have been in many communications with individual grad groups on how to understand and how to use those guidelines appropriately. And again, this is really Grad Council's purview, but they, you know, they made that decision to provide flexibility as best they can.
Yeah. We were one of the first campuses to say grad students could take satisfactory, unsatisfactory as a grade.
Oh, and that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
For instance.
Right.
They've really been trying to be as flexible as possible.
I guess I could also say that, you know, there's a couple of, these are now really in the details, but just so you see how thoroughly we are thinking about this, there's a 12 semester TA limit rule that is a system-wide rule. And that's not something that we have control over on the campus level, but that is an ongoing discussion, as I understand it,
system-wide,
at the system-wide level. Yeah. So just so you see, even at that level, when you have a rule like that and how we have to respond and think about exceptions for COVID. We're actively pursuing it. When you have something at that level, it takes a little more time. So it's still.
Let me also indicate that on behalf of all the vice chancellors of research, we're the ones that started this topic system-wide. The UC system has made a formal request to all the major federal research agencies that they provide an extra year of funding for graduate students and postdocs because of the challenges that this current pandemic is causing to the career development of people across the entire United States, not just in UC Merced. This is obviously a political issue, and it's up to Congress at the end of the day. But I can tell you that there is signs in a bill that's in the House right now that they've heard us, and that this may be in the next stimulus package that comes out of Washington.
Mm-hmm. One more example, if you don't mind, is that another sort of more system-wide level exception that is being worked on is, if you know, for international students after they advance to candidacy, they have 6 semesters of NRST, non-resident tuition fee waiver. That's not something that we can simply grant an extension on campus, but it is also being worked on. It's similar, but more on the grad division side of the house, similar exception that we are working on.
Great, thank you all for that. And another question that we have from a grad student is, does the university feel safe requesting, and this is by virtue of hosting studies on SONA with open sign-up slots, requesting students to take potentially unnecessary public transit in order to participate in human subjects research?
So, I can let Rose address that from the IRB perspective. I think the whole role of SONA is a critical part of the research program, of certain disciplines in the university. The whole role of SONA in the era of COVID-19 is something that we have to think about and how it can be addressed. And I think if it's work that can be done remotely, there are no issues. And that one of the things that we're encouraging and recognizing that this can't work under all circumstances, but if one can shift from doing in-person research to research can be done by Zoom interviews or whatever the mechanism is, and again, I know this won't work in all subject areas, we will encourage people to do that, but not just to protect the human subjects, but to protect themselves. So whether they're our own students or they're our general public, we're going to encourage that to happen. But obviously that can't happen for all areas of research.
Yeah, again, as I said, we're in conversations right now about all of these factors related to human subjects. There's going to be guidance that we're going to be putting out about sort of what kinds of research do we see as acceptable versus not acceptable in the current environment. And also the office will be helping researchers one-on-one with questions like this. If your study is one where you think public transportation is going to be an issue, like how does that impact the risks and those kinds of things. So we'll have guidance out about this in a couple of weeks, but we know there's always exceptions, so you should feel free to contact the IRB office if you have concerns like this, and we can provide additional guidance.
Thank you all. So we worked through all the questions that were submitted to us ahead of time. So I want to open up the opportunity for folks in the chat to submit questions or to use the raising hand function, and we can start taking those questions in. So we have the first question from Kim that says, the CSU will be holding classes online in the fall. Will the UC be doing the same?
So none of us can give you a definitive answer to that. I could tell you that I think if the decision is left to the campuses, unless there's, a huge spike in cases in Merced County, I think it's likely that UC Merced will probably do some kind of hybrid delivery system with some on-campus classes and some online instruction. And I think that's the direction that most of the campuses are going. But there could be a directive from the regents or from the president's office that says you're not going to do that. So we have to understand what happened at CSU came out of the chancellor's office for the CSU system. Not all the campuses agree with that. If it's left to our own devices and we aren't facing a major an expanded medical crisis, my prediction is that we will have some classes on campus. And I also have to say that in our conversations, it's quite clear we are also making distinctions between graduate courses and undergraduate courses. In an absolutely extreme case, which we don't think will happen, it's possible, even if we had all online courses for undergrads, we would probably try to make provisions for in-person courses for graduate students unless they were uncomfortable participating and only wanted to do it online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe I can just add to that and say that, you know, to the extent that we are hybrid, there's some basic sort of guidelines that you can imagine. A larger class is going to be more likely to be remote instruction. If you think about the logistics of trying to do social distancing and proper density in a large class, it's probably not so feasible. Smaller classes are more likely to be able to be conducted in person, at least to some degree. Lab sections, etc. This is all nothing definite, but that's all a possibility. The other thing I just wanted to add, and then maybe Marjorie wants to add anything, is that, you know, we all know that there's a possibility of a second wave, or who knows, maybe it's a third wave, another wave where things become severe enough that we do have to go back to a fully remote mode. So I would say, you know, if I was an instructor, if I'm a student, I should be always keeping that in mind, that it is this distinct possibility that that can happen. So you might want to think of it as sort of a default, but I don't want to really say that. I mean, a worst case scenario, that's probably a better way to put it, that we have to be prepared for. And that much we can certainly say.
And that would also be true for the research part as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Our Provost, Greg Canfield, speaks about it well in terms of thinking about presenting courses in modular form. Mm-hmm. So what is it that you want students to be learning, and what things can be taught in different ways? So if you've got a chance to be in person for part of the semester, what do you want to do in that way? What can you do very well in remote? Now, like we just had Grad Dean office hours. I've been having office hours all year, and I get 2, maybe 3 people showing up, okay? We're doing online ones now. We're getting 15, 20 people showing up. Clearly, you know, some of it is COVID, some of it is new students coming in. It may just be that it's more convenient for people to turn on their computer for an hour over lunch than it is to go to a physical place. That's something that seems to be better to do remote than in person. So that's the kind of thing that we're trying to look at now, is what actually works best in which modalities, and how do we flip that around and use it to our advantage.
Yeah, we may have big paradigm shifts that come as a result of our experiences right now. Other questions or comments or concerns?
Yeah, Shannon's got one here about, will the IRB or the body provide guidelines for how to handle assigning in-person lab work to undergrad research assistants? So this may be a difference of whether the undergrad RAs are volunteering or doing it for credit, for whether they are going to be able to be in the labs or not. We haven't really sorted that all out yet. If they're being paid or for credit, it's a little easier. We'd like to be able to have others be, you know, we pride ourselves on our undergrad research experience, but right now that's a little harder to figure just what that's going to look like when we go back on. At least at first.
Yeah, and just to put it into context, the other 9, well, not UCSF, the other 8 undergraduate campuses are all struggling with this. A couple of them have already come out and said no undergraduate research, period. It's unlikely that we will do that. But everybody's trying to figure out how to address the topic of undergraduates in research at the moment. And we don't have a firm answer today.
Yeah. Other questions? What are you hearing about people, where people may be feeling uncomfortable?
Good question.
What are they saying?
On that topic, I actually had a question that was submitted to me directly about when all these decisions are being made specifically around social distancing, how are you all ensuring that grad student concerns are coming through and helping make those major decisions?
So I would say the most important thing that we're saying in all the documentation is that no one can be forced to go back to campus and do research. So if people are uncomfortable with it, we have to make provisions for it. Now, there are certain kinds of work that you can obviously not do remotely. And eventually there'll have to be some resolution of that. But we're telling the faculty time and time again, you cannot require your students to do these things. They need, and I realize that there's an influence factor here, but they need to individually agree to participate in these activities.
I'm going to turn off my video. Not that I don't want people to see me, but I'm only hearing parts of things. I'm hoping I'll get a more stable connection if I don't have video. I couldn't hear all that Sam was saying. I'm trying to lip read, but I can guess because Sam, Chris, and I are in conversations about 5 hours a day.
All kind of bonded at the hip.
Yeah. But let me add that we're looking very carefully at the county and national health and state health guidelines, and really trying to keep those in mind. Sam and I are on a call every morning just about with all of the other VCRs across the system. The grad deans are talking almost daily. So we're really trying to share information about best practices as those are emerging. And that doesn't mean that it's going to allay all of the concerns of grad students, but we're at least trying to think about our students and the broader national and statewide community of grad students' concerns and what's coming up. The Council of Graduate Schools and other entities have a number of webinars on this, so everyone's talking about it. I'm looking forward to the DEI survey that's going out and to getting more information from our students. We've also been talking a lot with GSA and trying to get a sense. And as I can't remember if it was in this meeting or in our last call, our office hours, when Chris mentioned that we're talking with the grad chairs constantly about, what are they hearing, how are things going?
Let me also add that one of the things that constantly comes up in our conversations, and this will only impact a subset of graduate students and also postdocs, but everyone anticipates that for those of you that want academic jobs, the academic job market is going to be tenuous for the next year or so. And so this is why we are approaching federal agencies and why the grad deans are working on extending the allowable time to degree for postdocs, extending the rules so that people can be employed as a postdoc for more than 5 years, so that if there is funding available, people could continue in their graduate career or continue as a postdoc while they're on the job market looking for their next opportunity. The whole country is going to be in a serious financial bind for a while. And so we're trying to do what we can to shore up and protect people that are at the campus today.
Absolutely. Maybe I can just add, so Marjorie listed a number of channels that we get graduate student feedback and input into our decision-making processes. You know, some of them are somewhat informal, like office hours. Some of them are a little bit more formal, like GSA and the grad group chairs. But, you know, we basically, when we are, and I should have also said, and myself, you know, as the incoming acting dean, I'm starting to meet with individual grad groups. And so that's another channel. So I'll be meeting with interdisciplinary humanities right after this, and I'll be listening to them and getting their feedback. And so I welcome anybody on the call who wants to sort of have a meeting at the sort of graduate group level in your graduate group with your graduate students. I'm more than happy to do that. The question was in the context of safety on campus. And what I'm finding, you know, when we're, you know, we already mentioned that we're sort of on all of these work groups and task force and meeting joint councils, et cetera, and talking about this, is that when it gets to safety, it immediately becomes more of a human issue rather than a graduate student issue or an instructor issue. Often, so when it comes to safety, that's the guidelines pop up and they just become about the entire campus and everybody's well-being. I mean, I'm the grad dean. I'm not trying to, you know, say that the grad student voices are very important here, obviously. I'm just trying to say that it pops up a level and it really becomes about everybody.
Yeah, it's every person involved in the institution, including human subjects.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah.
And I want to add on to what you all had talked about. Marjorie, you mentioned the survey that just went out, so I wanted to make sure that folks were aware of that. The EDI office specifically developed the People First work group to address COVID-19 impacts on the entire campus community, and we've made a very specific effort that includes faculty, both non-Senate and Senate, undergrad and grad students, as well as postdocs and staff. And so if you haven't already completed that survey, an email just went out yesterday. A reminder will be sent out if you haven't seen it. And following that survey, we're planning on conducting virtual focus groups to specifically address what came out of that survey. And so we're gonna make sure that the grad student voice does come through those channels as well.
Great, thank you.
Great.
So we have two questions, one on comments on timeline for reopening the campus. As I've said before, we're trying to shoot for reopening research. Now let me be explicit here. Our initial focus is research that has to be done on campus, and you can't do it anywhere else except campus. We're also addressing the topic of field research. A lot of faculty and graduate students do work out in the field. Frankly, most of them are doing it now under reduced procedures, but nevertheless, we want to address that formally. But for on-campus research, our expectation, our goal, is to basically reopen up the campus for on-campus research. So all areas of research that are, and so they don't have to be deemed essential, all areas of research that can only be done on campus, our hope is that that can happen by mid-June. That's kind of the rough, realistic target for being able to do it, assuming we can get all the logistical stuff done. In terms of opening the campus up for undergraduate instruction in the fall, or all instruction in the fall, I think the campus is trying to hit the normal opening date. There is some possibility that it might push it back a week or two, depending upon conditions and weather. It's ready. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to be put in place above and beyond the norm to make any of these things possible. And so while the policies and kind of philosophical approaches to doing this are reasonably well worked out, it's the logistical stuff that we need to make it possible and safe that causes things to drag out a little bit. But you should be able to do research on campus this summer if your research can only be done on campus. For people who can do research remotely, including faculty, we're going to ask them to continue to do that work remotely until we get in a better situation with the virus. Until we have better medical treatment or we have a vaccine or whatever the development is that makes it safe to more broadly open up the campus. We also have to comply with the directives from the governor. And so I don't think that Sacramento expects anybody to be 100% open in the middle of June, because the state is nowhere near meeting the safety expectations that the governor laid out when he issued the first stay-at-home order.
And then, so there's a question about incoming grad students from Shannon in the chat that Marjorie just addressed, so you can look at that. I'm just going to add to what Marjorie said in terms of incoming grad students. So we have a regular messaging that comes out from the grad division to all incoming students. That happens every year, and we have a cycle of messaging. We are, of course, going to continue to do that and then add and modify that messaging based on COVID. And we've already started that process. And in terms of orientation, it will be online. It will be virtual. And we're finalizing plans. In fact, I have an email that I have to deal with and look at the plans and get those, approved and give our team feedback on that. But yes, I mean, because that's going to be in August and because that's going to be a large group kind of gathering, there's just no way that we can do that online. So, that we can do that in person. And of course, as soon as we sort of finalize it, and that's very soon, we'll send that out to everybody and let them know.
So I think another question that sort of comes up with that is, I know that your grad division and UC Merced is working to sort of provide extra support for graduate students over the summer into the beginning of fall, but is there going to be something similar provided for incoming grad students who aren't current students yet, but maybe coming in to a system where they kind of don't know what's happening?
So, I mean, well, this is a small thing, but we do have Summer Bridge that we normally do each year. That's kind of not just COVID. It's not a COVID thing. It's more general additional support for students incoming, getting acclimated to the campus. And I'm so sorry to say that we had to cancel that because of COVID. And so unfortunately, we don't have that mechanism. But let me, and so to be honest, I mean, above and beyond what we always do to provide support to incoming students, I will fully admit that I have not thought of that, and so maybe we can come up with something. Marjorie, you might want to chime in but we certainly haven't thought about what, given that we can't have Summer Bridge, and given COVID for incoming students, what extra? Yeah, but basically what we're doing right now is a lot of one-on-one, a lot of individual requests and questions that we get from incoming students. I think there's more so this year than previous years. And so, of course, we're handling those on a case-by-case basis. But doing something more systematic is an interesting idea, and at least I'll think about it. Marjorie, you want to chime in on that? That'll be in my purview.
I couldn't hear the question from Maria. I wasn't getting the internet, so I'm trying to piece it together
Marjorie,
just from your answer.
Sorry. It's okay. I think it's really in my purview at this point, so I'll be. Yeah, this is going to be after July 1.
Yeah. So let me add that, right now, as I said, there will be instruction, even if some of it is remote, and there will be research, barring some unforeseen rapid increase in pandemic activity. So the basic financial support mechanism for graduate students should be completely in place by the fall. I mean, it should be in place this summer, but it should certainly be in place by the fall, because they will be able to perform their regular activities that provide income. Granted, some of the situations may be unusual, all online instruction for some courses, or reduced research activity, but people will be able to do things and get paid.
Yeah.
And make progress towards their degrees.
I want to bring up a question that was sent to me privately. COVID-19 has placed a huge burden on grad students, staff, and faculty, especially those who have to take on childcare duties or other unexpected care work at home. Are there any updates on reopening the ECEC or other childcare resources?
So what I've heard on that is that yes, there are plans for reopening it, but it's going to be small density, so that it's reduced numbers.
It's also important to recognize that childcare falls under the governor's order. So regardless of what our intentions are, we can't open it until we're allowed to do it by at least the county, if not the state. We do have to conform to the public health dictates of both the county and the state of California, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. Now, there has been talk of the K through 12 starting up again in July.
Yes.
Which I suspect if that happens, a lot of our faculty and grad students who have families are going to want to just go to sleep for a week or two. But then hopefully they can get back to a more normal way. But with little kids, they really have to reduce the density because it's hard to tell kids to stay apart from one another. So they have to reduce the numbers. Mm-hmm. Rose, you can speak to that better. It's your line of work.
Other than this is a thing I worry about with restarting my own research. Like I don't have any actual data on it, but it's true. You can't tell a toddler where to be. They will be wherever they want to be. I know one of the things I saw in the stages, if you look at the steps of the governor's plan, is there's a distinction between just childcare for everybody and childcare for like essential workers that have to go somewhere and therefore can't be in their house. So as Sam said, we're sort of bound by these rules and may not be able to open the ECEC until that more general childcare for everybody is open. We may not be able to open it for students and faculty.
I see Akshay asking a question about international students.
I'm answering. I figure I can at least answer questions if I can't hear everything.
Marjorie, if you want to keep typing, I can. I think as far as I know, my bandwidth is fine. So we're not advising students to defer to the spring, although that is an option. We are trying to support students to be able to arrive in the fall, if at all possible. And this is one of the things that we are very closely monitoring and working with the international office on a weekly basis. We get a report from them. So what the status is, there's about 72-ish international SIR, so students who are coming in the fall. Roughly 20 of them, we think, either have their visas, they're already in the country, or they're going to be able to arrive. Again, this is, we hope, and we're working with them individually. And then for the others, it's more of a, we don't know yet. Visa offices are starting to open. We don't know if it's going to be very dependent on timing and on the particular country, probably. So we're just doing everything we can to work with them and figure this out. And then if not, deferral is an option. But again, we're not advising them. We're quite the opposite. We're trying to do everything we can to allow them to arrive. Let's see. I think, okay, so I think you can see Marjorie just kind of more or less added to that.
Other questions or concerns?
Back to my earlier question, what are you hearing from other grad students about their concerns? Certainly anyone with children, we know, and there are grad students who feel vulnerable themselves or live with vulnerable family members. I also know there are students who are anxious to try to get their research finished and get back in the lab. What are you folks all hearing?
I think another concern that I've been hearing a lot is just people being really worried about professional development and being able to get jobs, like if they were set to graduate this semester, for example. And I know that we mentioned earlier, or you all mentioned earlier, that there's work that's being put into sort of providing extra opportunities, reaching out to funding agencies. But are there potential professional development? Yeah, professional development workshops, perhaps, that the UC Merced can help students or can provide for graduate students?
Right. So we do a lot of those, and we'll continue to do them. We'll have more of them online. But I was saying we also just got a new grant from OP that's part of the UC HSI Doctoral Diversity Initiative that will further our efforts for preparing graduate students for postdocs and then for faculty positions. And so we'll be offering additional resources with that.
I can also add that we had basically each spring, one of our professional development activities is some kind of career day. You know, it may be data science or humanities or national labs or community college, CSU careers. So this year we had data science day. We had to cancel that because of COVID, but we quickly pivoted and we basically offered a online career conference to students. That message went out. It was quite at least popular, and we're getting survey feedback now. 120 students registered for that. And you know, having done this for many years now, that's a big number for one of these events. And I heard from one of our staff who did attend the online conference that it went quite well based on what he could tell. And like I said, we just sent a survey out. And then the last thing I just want to say is that this is definitely, so me, you know, as my associate dean add on, this is one of my charges, and it's something I've been thinking a lot about, how to do professional development given COVID. And I think sorry, this might have been in a different call, but we are, you know, there's going to be an acting associate dean that we are currently actively interviewing and trying to identify someone, and that will happen pretty soon. And one of the things that we're talking about with those candidates is, how are we going to do professional development next year given COVID, and what's that going to look like? And so I can't say anything too definite just yet, but that's what we have been doing, and we are very much thinking about it.
Yeah. So I think everyone in here knows, but no, we're playing musical chairs. So Sam has been the Vice Chancellor for Research for the past 14 years. He was doing this before the campus even started. And he is taking a sabbatical finally, and then going back to the faculty. I'm going to be Interim Vice Chancellor for Research. Chris is going to be acting Grad Dean, and we're hiring an acting Associate Dean who will take the lead on professional development activities. And we're close to finalizing that. Right. So there's a little bit of musical chairs going around.
Right.
Something that was in the chat was about inquiries on ILL, since there's no access to the library.
Yeah. So I just sent that question to the librarians, Haipeng Li, and I think I got a response. I'm going to try to get it. See if I can. Oh my gosh, I get lots of emails and have somewhere in here. So it's just, this is going on today. So services available. The response. It's going to take me a little time to parse this. I don't want to try to do this online, but this is something that in fact, I have information on, and I've just been in these Zooms all day. And so I've got to give myself a moment to sort of process it. And hopefully, in my next meeting with Interdisciplinary Humanities, we can address this more specifically, because Ivan Soto has been getting those responses. And once I'm understanding what's going on there, I'll make sure it gets out to the rest of the community. So,
and let me make a comment about the library from a research perspective explicitly. So the library is an essential research space for certain areas of research. For me, it isn't, because I can do everything electronically, but we recognize that a number of faculty and graduate students actually have to be physically in the library to use some of the resources there. So the intent is that it will be designated as such. We may have to, the library may have to set aside certain hours that are dedicated only to research, so people can go in there and access resources at those times. I don't know what strategy they're going to use, but you can imagine if we have a significant number of undergraduates on campus in the fall, it would be ideal for people that are using the library for research, faculty and graduate students, don't have to be interspersed with that undergraduate population. So I can conceive of maybe select hours that are reserved for certain populations, but it'll be up to the library to come up with a strategy for that.
Yeah.
I mean, the bottom line is the only mechanism that we have today in this country to deal with COVID-19 is social distancing.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or concerns from anyone?
So I guess another question that has come up in just talking to graduate students is having access to go in and pick up potential software that they need, or like computers that they need or anything like that from the office. We know that there's a form where you can request access. Is that something that's going to be continuing on even if the campus starts to reopen in like phases? Or is there more thoughts into how that might be addressed in the future?
So let me address that. It is possible to do it now. It has to be initiated by your faculty member, but it's possible to do it now. And we've had a number of people do that, but the process is it has to be initiated by the faculty member. Even if it's a one-time request, it has to be initiated by the faculty. As we start to open up, if the work that you need to do on campus, I mean, if it's work that has to be done on campus, it won't matter. If it's just going in and getting materials, to be able to do a one-time pickup and go home, we will probably have a simpler mechanism, but it'll probably still require approval by a grad group chair or by your PI or by a department chair or somebody like that. It's unlikely that we'll be in a situation, at least for the next few months, where people can just go on campus at their own volition if they aren't required to be there for their research purposes or instructional purposes. I mean, obviously, if you're on campus doing instructional activities, and some of the remote courses, as you know, still have to have filming and things done on campus, you can obviously go by and pick stuff up there. But if you're to make a separate trip to campus just to pick something up, will probably require notification and approval from someone for the next few months. But it'll be possible to do it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that answer. So we're sort of nearing the end of time. We have about 6 more minutes left. Are there other outstanding questions that people may have about anything that was mentioned today, or anything that just comes to mind as you're sort of listening to the different questions that are being answered? Please feel free to share them now.
All right, I want to reiterate the thank yous that we're seeing in the chat. Thank you to all 4 of our panelists. This was really informative and I'm sure eased a lot of folks' worries and answered a lot of our questions. I want to remind everyone of the upcoming events that we have in our virtual dialogue series. Please visit the diversity website so that you can RSVP to those. We have them Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And again, thank you to all of our speakers today. And as a reminder, this session will be recorded, or was recorded. So for people that weren't able to attend today, please let them know that at some point it'll be on our website and they can access it. Thank you again to all of our speakers.
Thanks for organizing it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. And if anybody has any questions they want to contact any of us directly, we'll welcome those questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.